February when I was a kid, I had an irrational fear of our basement. Though if I do say so myself, our basement was kind of scary for a kid. It was a pretty big basement. There was an L-shaped couch right in the middle of the basement that sat right in front of a wooden support column. In front of the couch was the big old BO TV we had down there, which had all of our video game consoles plugged into it. The layout of the basement was set up as a big circle that went around the couch. There was a booth and table in one corner, an old bar in the other corner, which had the door to the laundry room behind it. And then, in the other corner, closest to the stairs, was the doorway to my dad's little workout room. My dad rented out the upstairs of the house to an old lady named Ruth, so we only had access to the first floor and the basement. My dad would usually hang out in the living room on the first floor, hence why our video games were all downstairs on the crappy TV, because our dad didn't really hang out down there. I'm the youngest sibling. I have 2 older brothers. I was anywhere from 6 to 8 years old when this happened. My older brothers weren't home, so they must have been having playdates with other kids. It was just my mom and me at home at the time. My dad was likely at work. Usually, I'd be playing video games with my brothers in the basement, so I wouldn't be scared. But since I was alone, I remember being kind of creeped out as I walked down the stairs. That basement door sucked because it wouldn't stay open by default. It would just slowly creep shut unless something was propped in front of it to keep it open. That just made me feel even more isolated from the upstairs and my mom. I was playing whatever old video games I was into at the time, alone on that grey fluffy couch. Any little sound in the basement would make me pause my game and look in whatever direction I heard it. There would always be creepy sounds that came from the laundry room, and even though I grew to expect them, they still sometimes creeped me out. They were usually familiar sounds though, but when I heard an unusual sound come from inside the laundry room, I paused my game. It wasn't the sound of the laundry machine or the boiler clacking, it was the sound of something dropping to the floor and bouncing once or twice. I remember jumping off the couch and running upstairs to find my mum, saying, "There's someone in the basement." I remember my mum's calm reaction, asking me what happened, and then explaining to me that nobody was down there. To make me feel better, she went back down to the basement with me. She opened the door to the laundry room, turned on the light, and looked inside for a few seconds. Then she shut the door and said, "There's no one in there." Naturally, I felt better, and she went back upstairs. I went back to playing video games. I can't remember how much time passed before I went back upstairs to eat a snack. My mom was already preparing dinner. I remember it being dark out now, which only added to my fear of the basement. The basement had 2 small windows, which did allow some light in during the day, so at night it was just completely pitch black down there. I did end up going back down there though. Eventually, I heard the sound of the heater in the laundry room turn on, only it was extremely loud. I turned around and noticed the laundry room door was now open. I got off the couch and slowly walked to the laundry room door. It was pitch black inside of there. I was scared to turn on the light. I just wanted to shut the door. I gathered up enough courage to run at the door and slam it shut, then run back to the couch. For some reason, I just felt safer on the couch. I guess for whatever reason, I didn't once think that it was strange that the door was magically open now, even after my mom had closed it earlier. The next thing I remember was hearing a man's voice from behind me. At first, my brain didn't register what I had just heard. It didn't seem real at first. I turned around and saw some sickly-looking man sitting in the booth in the corner of the basement, with his arm on the table and his head resting on his fist. He said, "My God, how you've grown." I was frozen stiff. I couldn't even scream. I just looked at the man in the corner with my mouth hanging open, twitching. He slowly stood up in this crooked, hunched-over posture, and it seemed like he was slowly starting to walk toward me as he said, "Your mother won't let me see you guys." I finally was able to scream, and I just bolted for the stairs. I was screaming, "Mom!" the whole way up to the kitchen. I slammed the basement door and locked it. I screamed and cried to my mom that there was a man downstairs. I saw the look on her face, and she was petrified. She called 911, and I strangely don't remember what happened in the moments before the police showed up. I just remember a bunch of police officers getting there and going down to the basement. I was with my mom and a police officer in a safe room while they found him. The man they found was my uncle, my estranged uncle, my mum's brother, who was basically excommunicated from our family for being a child rapist. Our parents never wanted him anywhere near us, nor did my mom want any contact with him. He broke into the house and had been hiding in the basement for God knows how long. I didn't even know his face, as the last time I'd seen him, I was a baby. I haven't seen him since then. He went back to prison for another 4 years for another sex crime. We don't know where he is now. It was approaching Halloween. We were in the middle of October. My cousin Andy's birthday is October 15th, so for his 12th birthday, we all went over to our Uncle John and Aunt Melissa's house as they were throwing him a family birthday party. We have a pretty big family, and so our family gatherings can often get hectic. It was still warm outside, so the party was mostly in the backyard. Their house is pretty big, and we always used to love playing hide-and-seek type games because of it. Andy and I are the same age. My older brother Chase is 2 years older than me. He would play with us too. Our other cousins were a little older, but they'd still play with us. We'd just make teams and take turns as hiders and seekers, giving each other time limits to find the opposing hiding team. If you were found, you'd have a chance to run outside to the backyard to be safe if you managed to not get tagged. We could use the whole house minus our aunt's and uncle's bedroom, and I'm not exaggerating when I say there were hundreds of places to hide. In the basement, there's a separate room that's considered Aunt Melissa's fashion room, as we call it. She's a fashion designer, and inside of it she has a bunch of mannequins with different pieces of clothing she's designed. Some are full-body mannequins, others are just torsos without heads and regular stands underneath them. She also has some studio lights, some official camera equipment, and a green screen drop. We had been playing the game for a little while already. Chase and I were hiding now. We both chose to hide in the basement. Chase hid somewhere in the main section of the basement while I hid in the fashion room. I actually grabbed 2 blankets from the ottoman in the basement and brought them into the fashion room. One for me to hide under, and the other one I was going to throw over one of the mannequins as a decoy. With the blanket thrown over it, it genuinely looked like it could be a person hiding underneath. I thought it would be a funny little gotcha moment whenever someone yanked the sheet off of it. So I got into my hiding position under a desk in the corner of the room and hid under the blanket. Now it was a waiting game. That was honestly a big chunk of the game if your hiding spot was good. After quite a long time, I heard commotion outside in the main room of the basement as Chase and one of my cousins were laughing and yelling, presumably as Chase was being chased around the basement. I heard them then stomping up the stairs. By the sound of it, Chase was trying to make it to the yard without being tagged. After that, I waited in silence for over 10 minutes, easily. I was getting uncomfortable in this position and, quite honestly, bored. Finally, Chase came downstairs into the room and called my name. Then he said the food was being served outside, so the game was over. I was starving. I hurriedly rushed upstairs into the backyard where all the catered food was now out and being served. At some point after eating and having a conversation with Aunt Melissa, I remembered that I totally left those 2 blankets in her fashion room. Most importantly, that I left one over her mannequin, which she would not be happy about. So after going to the bathroom, I went back down to the basement and into the fashion room, where I turned on the light and saw that the blanket was no longer on that mannequin. Instead, the blanket was covering something else. It appeared to be another mannequin, though this one seemed to be propped in a seated position, which I wasn't aware of any mannequins being in. The closer I got, I started to realize that it was moving, and I heard breathing. On top of that, there was this funky smell that wasn't there before. There was a person under there, but who? I laughed and said, "Who is that?" They didn't answer. I felt this feeling of uneasiness growing in my stomach. I looked down to see if I could see the shoes they were wearing, but what I saw were the bare feet of a black person. Nobody at this party was black. I turned and headed for the door. I rushed back outside and told my uncle to call the police. There was someone in the basement. Others overheard me, and panic quickly ensued. My uncle and a few others rushed down to the basement. I followed behind. When we got to Aunt Melissa's fashion room, the blanket was now on the floor, and whoever was underneath it was gone. I swore up and down that someone was just underneath it, explaining the bare feet and the smell. A bunch of family members searched the whole house, and ultimately, my uncle called the police, taking my claims very seriously. When the police showed up, it was kind of a whole scene, and everyone at the party was concerned. Neighbors even came out to see if everything was okay. Every possible hiding place was checked, and no one was in the house. I didn't make it up though. It was genuine, what I saw. I just wish he had turned up so that everyone would have seen I was right. Even if mostly everyone did believe me, I still just wanted them to see what I saw for themselves. During parties, they leave the doors unlocked since family members are circulating in and out for hours, so it's no shocker that someone off the street could have just walked right in. Maybe a homeless person, which would account for the smell. The whole thing still just felt so crazy, and it's a haunting memory for sure. This story takes place when I was 9 years old. I'm now almost 25. I was at my great-grandfather's house in Idaho during Christmas break, visiting family and whatnot. This was also the first year my mom's boyfriend came with us because my parents had divorced the summer before. My grandpa used to live in a small Indian reservation town with about 1,000 people. His house was a small 2-story home with a lot of field and forest. It was a beautiful house and property, and I miss it dearly. Anyway, about a day after we got there, my aunt, uncle, and cousins, who lived in the same town as us, surprised us by driving 10 hours to visit, even after telling us they wouldn't be able to because of work. It was fun because, at the time, my cousins and I were close. One night, my uncle, my step-aunt, and my cousin, who lived just next door to my grandpa, came over and visited with everyone. The grown-ups started talking about grown-up things. So my cousins, Sam, who was 9, Evan, who was 12, and Kennedy, who was 10, and I decided to go downstairs to the basement and play our monster game. The way this game was played was that Sam and Evan were the monsters. They hid in the basement with the lights completely off, and Kennedy and I had to find them. They would make noises so we could kind of have an easier time finding them, but not fully. Then, if we got near them, they would make monster noises and chase Kennedy and me, and we had to run back to the top of the stairs, which was our safe zone. I know it was kind of a stupid game thinking about it now, but at the time, it was pretty scary and really fun. Anyway, Sam and Evan went downstairs to hide and told us to wait 2 minutes before coming down to find them. Kennedy and I waited upstairs, and then we went down. As usual, it was completely pitch black downstairs. The only light came from the pellet stove and the moon shining through the window. Even though we knew it was just our cousins hiding, it was still pretty scary because of how dark and silent it was. About 5 minutes later, Sam and Evan jumped out and scared us, then chased us back upstairs. We decided to play another round. We waited 2 minutes, then headed back down. This time, I went first. As we descended, we heard Evan or Sam hit the wall, which made me jump. We kept walking when I suddenly noticed a figure standing outside the window. I stopped and put my hand out to stop Kennedy. She got a little irritated and said, "Come on, why are you stopping?" I didn't say anything but pointed toward the window, showing her the figure. Kennedy noticed it, then whispered, "Sam, Evan, we need you to stop the game. There's someone standing outside." Surprisingly, Sam responded. I figured he would have wanted to continue the game and not say anything. He said, "You guys are lying. You're just scared." I was starting to get upset because they wouldn't believe us. "Guys, seriously, look at the window above the TV." Then we saw Sam and Evan emerge from underneath the ping-pong table my grandpa had for us, and they looked up. Evan just laughed a little and said, "It's probably Uncle Stan just outside smoking." I knew it wasn't my Uncle Stan because he always smoked outside on the front porch, right by the front door. I told Evan that, and then Sam, sounding very annoyed, said, "Then it's probably Grandpa just checking out the house. You know him, he's always checking to see if the house has any problems. If you guys are worried about it, then go upstairs and check." I went upstairs to check, pretending I was just looking for something. I entered the living room and everyone who was supposed to be there was there, sitting in the living room. It wasn't Uncle Stan, my grandpa, or anybody we knew. My stomach dropped. There was definitely someone out there. I didn't want to tell the adults because I was worried they wouldn't believe me. I went back downstairs shaking and told them, "Guys, everyone's in the living room. No one is missing. There is someone out there." Sam and Evan finally realized this wasn't a joke, and their faces turned from skeptical to scared. Kennedy began to cry a little. I told her not to make too much noise. We all went to the top of the stairs to figure out what to do. Of course, Sam and Evan started giving dumb ideas like shooting the guy or something. We didn't want to tell the adults, so we just stayed at the top of the stairs for 5 minutes. Then we went back down. When we got back down, the figure was gone. We assumed he had just left and went on his way. We decided we didn't want to play the game anymore and instead played ping pong. We turned on the basement light, and when they came on, we noticed the window was cracked open. I thought to myself, was the window cracked open this whole time? I looked toward the furniture, and my heart suddenly dropped. There was a man in his mid-40s sitting in one of the sofa chairs, staring at us. We were so scared that we just stood there, frozen. The guy began smiling at us in a creepy way. Then he started to stand. I yelled, "Run!" We ran up the stairs and slammed the basement door shut. Then we ran into the living room, crying, telling our family that there was a man downstairs. One of my uncles, who was a cop, grabbed one of my grandpa's guns and headed downstairs. After a few minutes, my uncle came back up and said there was no one down there. We assumed the man must have climbed back out the window and ran. The adults believed us when we said someone had been there because there were footprints in the snow outside, leading to my grandpa's driveway. Nothing was stolen from the basement, which was a relief, but we were all terrified. We sat with our mums, hugging them for comfort. That night, when it was time to go to bed, I was still afraid, so I slept in bed with my mum. My cousins and I never played that game again. My grandpa was pretty upset because he thought his windows couldn't be opened from the outside, but he was glad that we weren't harmed. My grandfather passed away in October 2017, and I miss him dearly. But ever since that incident, I have always been afraid of going into any basement alone, even as I've gotten older. Although I haven't been back to my grandpa's in almost a year, I am still scared of that basement, or any basement, to this day.